Grant Udinski is out, which means the Browns' next head coach seems pretty obvious now. We'll talk about it coming up on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. Grant Udinski has dropped out of the Browns search for a new head coach, the third candidate to do so. I don't think it's as bad as it seems, though. I'll explain. Plus, with him dropping out, I think it's now pretty obvious who the next Browns head coach is going to be. They are able to hire whenever, and the person I'm thinking of, which is Nate Sscheelhaase, by the way, actually feels like it's probably what the team needs right now. I'll explain all that and more coming up. And I do want to thank you for being in every day with the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network, and that is all thanks to you. So, ironically enough, I had recorded an episode on Monday morning, became very irrelevant after the news that Grant Udinski had dropped out of the Browns search for a new head coach early Monday. We don't know the entire backstory here, but there are reports that indicate he is receiving a pay raise to go back to Jacksonville, potentially. If he does go back to Jacksonville, he is still pursuing or in the mix for the Bills head coaching job. So he's at least staying in that search for now. But he did receive a pay raise that would kick in on his contract with Jacksonville if he ends up returning as the offensive coordinator there. And again, I understand where the easy sort of place to go when you see this news, because it's the Browns and because they've been unable to get out of their way for so many years now, and they've messed up so many different big decisions throughout their time since they returned in '99. I understand why the natural thought process is going to just be nobody wants the Browns job. The Browns don't know what they're doing. The Browns are missing out on all these candidates. Because Udinski is now the third guy that has dropped out. And I understand where that comes from. And I talked about this last week. The Browns, in a lot of ways, don't get or frankly deserve the benefit of the doubt when it comes to this type of stuff, because they have to prove people otherwise. Like, until they start making the right decisions and the right hires and getting the right players and trading for the right quarterbacks or drafting the right quarterbacks, nobody really trusts them. And so building that trust takes time. It's been a slow deterioration since they returned in '99 that people don't believe that, they can do anything right or that it's a desirable job or all these different things. So I completely understand where all of this comes from. I do. But I want to remind people of the context around why each candidate that dropped out. Starting with the fact that Mike McDaniel last week had an interview scheduled for Wednesday, was reported that he wasn't going to take that interview because he was poised to be eventually taking the Chargers OC job. Now, we now know that there's not a contract in writing for him to be the Chargers OC just yet. But they also, he also bowed out of the Bills head coaching search. So unlike Udinski, who's still pursuing that job, Mike McDaniel said, I don't want either of these jobs. Sounds like he's still in the mix for the Raiders job, but it feels unlikely he takes that job either. And he's probably going to end up with the Chargers. So that felt like a matter of he wants that Chargers OC job. He dropped out of multiple searches in order to sort of pursue that job and didn't want to waste time, anybody's time, his own or these other teams, talking to them when his heart maybe wasn't in it. And I can respect and understand that. I can. With Jesse Minter, one day later was supposed to be the interview on Thursday last week. We now know basically that he was going to get that Ravens job. He was interviewing with the Ravens for the Ravens job the day before his second interview with them, and that team seemed pretty much poised to offer him the job. I'm assuming he knew that going in. I'm assuming he already kind of had the offer in hand, and he probably called the Browns and said, listen, if you're not offering me the job, I really want to take this Ravens job. I don't want to waste anybody's time here either. I think that's fair to say as well, that it kind of came down to having an opportunity that he wanted more, or an opportunity already in hand, and the Browns are going to continue their search. They weren't ready to make a hire at that point. As we know, they weren't Rooney Rule compliant. There were still a number of candidates they wanted to talk to. So understanding that, I don't see that was one where it's, rip the Browns. They didn't know what they were doing and they missed out on Jesse Minter. I think it was just straight up that the timing sort of worked out where both him and McDaniel kind of knew where their heads and their hearts were, and it wasn't going to be with either of these jobs. So it was what it was. I don't think that either of those were about, hey, the Browns job is totally undesirable. Maybe there's a little bit of that where these opportunities that they were taking were more desirable to them than what the Browns job is. But I remind you, they still took initial interviews with the Browns. Same thing goes for Grant Udinski, who went through 2 interviews. I don't think he was trying to waste people's time. I don't think it was a waste of his time. I think he legitimately was in the mix for this. I think he legitimately was willing to consider it. I wonder if, for him, it got to a point where maybe he realized he wasn't going to get the job, or that, he does like the Bills job a little bit more. There can be this can be a situation where like multiple things can be true. And we've already talked about the most desirable jobs versus the least desirable jobs. I think Buffalo is certainly at the front of that list, considering the quarterback that they have. And so you live with some of that stuff, but this doesn't have to be that, well, everyone's dropping out of the Browns search because nobody wants this job, and the Browns strike again. They never do anything right. They can never get anything right. And I'll also remind you that I still think that they have a candidate they're interviewing on Monday, Nate Sscheelhaase, who is similarly positioned like Grant Udinski to be one of those hot up-and-coming names and offensive minds in the game that they also have extreme interest in. And like this doesn't mean they can't still get a qualified candidate out of this, or somebody that they think highly of, or somebody that they were probably considering from the start anyway. And it feels like that is where this thing is heading, that Nate Sscheelhaase is probably poised to be the Cleveland Browns' next head coach. They'll talk to him on Monday. We'll see what happens, but it does feel like maybe they leave Monday in LA with an offer on the table, or ready to make an offer the next morning, or whatever it's going to be. We shall see. But it does feel like that's kind of where this thing is heading. Now, Jim Schwartz, still in the picture. We know the team has talked to some other candidates as well, which I do want to talk about next, because they are now Rooney Rule compliant as well after talking to Nate Sscheelhaase on Monday. But my gut feeling here is that with Udinski especially out of it, I felt like it was kind of coming down to him and Scheelhaase. They will probably be hiring at some point this week. Could happen any second, could happen any minute. Nate Sscheelhaase to be their next head coach. We'll talk about that some more in depth, why I think it's actually what the team needs right now in terms of what they need in a coach. But I want to review with you why the Browns can make this hire whenever they're ready after Monday. We'll get into that coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to stay locked in on every moment than with PrizePicks, the daily fantasy app, where it always feels good to be right. With football season coming down the home stretch, now's the perfect time to close it out strong. PrizePicks makes watching the game even more exciting by letting you build simple lineups around player projections. No drafts, no waiting, just football action all the way through the rest of the playoffs. PrizePicks is incredibly easy to get started. You pick 2 or more players and choose more or less on their projections. Early payouts are an option. It lets you cash out if a player starts getting hot. And yeah, I also love being able to mix stars from different teams and build lineups that fit how you want to watch the game. For example, maybe you want to put Drake May rushing yards into your PrizePicks setup next for the big game in a couple weeks. Maybe you saw Sam Darnold light up the Rams in the NFC Championship game and you're eyeing his passing yards. You can combine both these teams' quarterbacks and build your lineup in PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not just you against the house, it's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your projections or positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game It's people moving the action. So when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now, I can actually take part live in a market powered by the people. You're no longer just a spectator, play by play. You decide. Trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Just download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives, LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm. All right, so the Browns will be cleared to make their hire pretty much as soon as possible after they talk to Grant Udinski on Monday. Depending on when you're listening to this podcast, it could already be happening. It could already be done, whatever. But this all kind of came to fruition very quickly over the weekend. So as much as everyone freaked out about, well, they're taking too long, they misplayed this, they haven't fulfilled the Rooney Rule, all these different things, it all worked out where today, Monday, was going to be the day that the stage was going to be set for them to make whatever decision they were going to make. Obviously, with Grant Udinski out of the picture, maybe it becomes a little bit easier of a decision, or a more quick decision. But they are going to be well positioned now to basically finalize this thing as soon as possible. It could even be on Monday because they fulfilled the Rooney Rule once they talked to Scheelhaase. They had an interview over the weekend with Anthony Lynn, who is obviously the former Chargers head coach. Also is currently working with the Commanders as a running back coach and run game coordinator. So he has some offensive experience. It's another well-respected mind in this game. They spoke to him in Florida over the weekend. So he was the first half of the Rooney Rule, if you will, in terms of talking to a minority candidate. Scheelhaase fulfills the second, and then they will be cleared to make a hire whenever they wish. Now, I talked about this last week a little bit, but Andrew Berry is not somebody who is just going to have like a sham interview, if you will, with somebody to fulfill or check the boxes of the Rooney Rule. So I don't think that that's what this was with Anthony Lynn. I do wonder if they maybe talk to him because they envision, hey, maybe there's a world where you can be part of a staff that's put together here by whatever coach we might hire, whether that's Todd Monken, who's still in the conversation, whether that's Nate Sscheelhaase, who obviously we know is in the conversation, whether that's Jim Schwartz, who's very much still in the conversation. Maybe they felt that's somebody that could fit on a staff or has a relationship with somebody that would work or whatever. And so they felt like they should talk to him. We also did find out that Tom Telesco, longtime executive in this league, he worked with the Chargers, actually hired Anthony Lynn. He worked with the Raiders as well for a short time, that he has helped sort of oversee this search and work alongside Andrew Berry. They have a relationship because Andrew Berry got his first job from Tom Telesco, believe it or not, in the NFL. And so he probably has that connection, and it was somebody that they were able to reach out to and say, hey, can we talk to you about this job? We want to sort of pick your brain. And as we know, these conversations can oftentimes be getting information from somebody, seeing how they see things, wanting to share football knowledge and take different things. It's why I said at the time, early on in the search, when John Harbaugh was available, you do what you can to just get John Harbaugh simply to come into the building and have a conversation with you, because if he gives you some good information, something you can build on or take with you, even that's beneficial to a team like the Browns to take and run with and use in some capacity as they build their vision out for this team. But I would expect this decision gets made pretty quickly here. There are currently, the Browns are one of 4 jobs still left after the Steelers hired Mike McCarthy over the weekend, because that leaves them, it leaves the Bills, it leaves the Cardinals, it leaves the Raiders. It feels like the Raiders could be waiting until after the Super Bowl to make a move, because I think they may be really interested in Clint Kubiak. The Bills might be really interested in Clint Kubiak, and it might be waiting to talk to him. But it sounds like Grant Udinski's still on the table for them. He's still going through with that search, it sounds like. So they might have other options there as well. But ultimately, the process of this has always played out in a way, despite 3 candidates dropping out, which we just talked about last segment. It's played out in a way where the Browns were still able to be in play for the guys that they, I think, liked the most, which were always Jim Schwartz, which were always Grant Udinski, which was always Nate Sscheelhaase. I don't know that the only other team that was really linked to any of those, the Ravens interviewed Jim Schwartz. They already have their head coach, and there's not like they're plucking Jim Schwartz now because they have a defensive-minded coach. They're not going to – Jim Schwartz probably isn't going there when their systems aren't the same. And then you also have the Bills' interest in Grant Udinski, but they've always kind of had their sights set on these guys. And while other jobs are being accepted and taken and people were panicking, I think the Browns were sort of calm, cool, and collected because they understood where this process was heading. There was a little bit of a question of how are they going to fulfill the Rooney Rule after Mike McDaniel dropped out, but they got that taken care of this weekend with the Anthony Lynn conversation, knowing that they were always poised to talk to Nate Sscheelhaase, and now here they are. And we'll see when that decision what comes of that on Monday and how quickly a decision is made. If I had to guess, if I had to estimate, I probably would say it happens within the next 24 hours if you listening to this episode. If you're listening to this episode on Monday, I'm going to guess it probably happens before Tuesday, maybe Monday night, maybe Tuesday morning, whatever it might be. I don't think they're going to slow play this thing late into the week. I think it's going to be made pretty quickly here, and they're going to get something finalized, get an offer on the table to whoever, and I think it ultimately will be Nate Sscheelhaase, and then they'll sort of move on with the next step of the process in an introductory press conference, and they'll have their next coach sort of in tow, which is also the Rams losing was a benefit to the Browns if Scheelhaase really is the guy, because now they're able to hire him immediately. If he had won that game, they would have had to wait, obviously, until after the Super Bowl to make that hire. So it's all set up now. The stage is set for them to make a hire whenever they want. They don't have to wait for the Super Bowl. Rooney Rule's fulfilled. Everything's in place. And it does kind of feel like that's going to be coming here in very short order, and that it very well could end up being Nate Sscheelhaase. If that's who it ends up being, I do think Nate Sscheelhaase is, and I thought of this about Udinski as well, is kind of what the team needs at this stage and at this juncture. I'll explain coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that part of it is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. Sponsored jobs boost your post to the people who are the best match for the role, and it makes a real difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. Spend more time interviewing candidates that check all the boxes and less time stressing and you'll get the results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. So as much as I'm sure people are disappointed that Grant Udinski's out, and I do think Grant Udinski fell into a similar bucket of what I'm about to describe with Nate Sscheelhaase. For where this team is at right now, it does feel like a Nate Sscheelhaase is what it needs. It's what this franchise needs. And what I mean by that is, listen, hiring Jim Schwartz to be the head coach, which, listen, that could happen. He still could end up being the guy that they roll with here. We'll see how things process or progress the next day or so, right? And I'm not saying it's impossible he gets the job. But to me, hiring somebody like Jim Schwartz would suggest that the Browns think they're closer than they really are. That they can get somebody in here, an offensive mind, to get this offense turned around quickly, to match this defense, and they'll be off and running. I think Nate Sscheelhaase, if he's the answer, if he's the guy that they choose, if he's the hire, I think hiring him makes a lot of sense for where the Browns are at right now. We all know the truth. They're a team trying to supplement the roster with young talent and rebuild in that way, especially on the offensive side of the football. And they need somebody who can come in, frankly, and give that offense a vision, give that offense a purpose, give that offense a direction. in terms of players that they need and, holes that they have to fill and schematically what they're trying to accomplish and what they're trying to do. And I think you saw some of that with the offense the Rams obviously run and the McVay offense and all those things. And Scheelhaase's role in that in terms of like drawing things up each week and helping with the game plan, especially on the passing side of things. There was some really creative stuff that we had a chance to sort of witness in that game against the Seahawks on Sunday night that he brings to the table. But the idea of you get a Sean McVay disciple coming in who can provide this vision of what things are supposed to look like and get it there is I think super valuable for personally, but also for the Browns. And I think it's exactly what they need. If you hire a Jim Schwartz, you're bringing in a coordinator, you're hoping that they're going to stay for a long time and sort of shape this offense, get it going in the right direction. But then if they become a good coordinator, if they're having a lot of success, you got to know they're going to get plucked in a year or two, maybe more. But in the next several years, that guy could be gone. And then you're sort of stuck holding the bag, trying to figure out how you replace that guy, how you set your eventual quarterback up for success and keep the offense kind of moving in the right direction. I'm not saying it has to be an offensive hire. I've unsubscribed from the idea that it has to be one or the other. But I think specifically to where the Browns are at, where their offense has no identity, you need somebody who's going to be here for a long time and be able to have a vision in mind and then put that into effect in the way that they build the roster, in the way that they execute things in practice, in the way that they execute things in the field, and actually make it happen. None of this like half measures, none of this like we're closer than we are. They just need to go out and rebuild this thing sort of from the ground up. That doesn't mean there's not parts and pieces. They have some tangible pieces that I think are future cornerstones of this group. Quinshon Judkins, Harold Fenton Jr. But we know the holes that this team has. They need to figure out what their offensive line is going to look like. They have to basically revamp that entire thing. Getting in somebody like Scheelhaase in here, who has a fresh perspective, comes over from Sean McVay's tree, and is young and is sort of going to grow with the team. I think it's valuable to just let him kind of go to work and know it might take a couple years to get this offense in a place where it maybe looks like the Rams, or it looks like the Jaguars where Udinski is because that's the similar tree, or it looks like Kevin O'Connell's offense, all these Sean McVay guys. That's what you're kind of hoping to accomplish. It's okay that it might take some time here, and I think that's kind of what hiring Nate Sscheelhaase suggests, is that they understand it's a build. It's something that needs to be built from the ground up, and they trust him to execute that plan and get it there. But like O-line's an issue. The receiver room needs a lot of help. It needs more than just one guy. They might need another tight end because these systems all rely on multiple tight ends for the most part. Kevin Stefanski's did as well. And we still don't have our full answer on the quarterback position yet. I want to see Shedeur succeed. I think there's a chance that he is again in play for the starting job next year, and it could be his. But we might need to see more in that way as well, and it's going to take some time to figure that position out. Whether it's let him audition next year for the starting job in 2027 and beyond, or if they decide they need to draft somebody, or they decide to sign a veteran to sort of put in that room for competition purposes, whatever it might be. You want somebody who can come in and bring a fresh perspective to this offense, give it some direction, and grow with it. And that person feels like it's Nate Sscheelhaase. So that's where I'm at with this. I would have been good whether it was him or Udinski, either way, for the same reason. But it feels like that is where this thing is heading. It feels like it is going to be Nate Scheelhaase's job. He's going to come in. He's going to bring that fresh perspective. And, that's no disrespect to Jim Schwartz. It sounds like, by the way, from what's being reported, Nate Sscheelhaase is okay keeping Jim Schwartz on staff, which is probably the best of both worlds. That's what the Browns have wanted all along, is to hire a coach that they believe is innovative, up and coming, trending in the direction the NFL is heading, but also that was willing to keep Jim Schwartz around because Jim Schwartz is such a respected and successful defensive coordinator and defensive mind in this game. And we've seen that tangibly here in Cleveland already. I think that was important to them. And if Scheelhaase is the guy, they're going to get a chance to probably keep him around, which is good news for them, all things considered. So this is probably going to work out where it's the best of both worlds anyway. You get to keep Jim Schwartz, you get Nate Sscheelhaase in here, you get a fresh perspective that's needed for the offense, and hopefully that can be exactly. Hopefully he can take the Browns to the place that they're hoping to go. And I feel excited about that the same way I would have with Udinski being the hire. And by the way, like, I don't know if hiring Nate Sscheelhaase should come with, like, setting off fireworks in your neighborhood levels of fanfare. Like, I don't know if it's an absolute win, because as I've talked about, there is an unknown piece here. We don't know how he's going to command a locker room, how he's going to be a leader of men inside that building. That is the big question with him. It's why the Browns are doing these personality tests and things to sort of find out what kind of person he is, what kind of leader he is, how is he going to handle those situations inevitably when things go bad for the Browns, because they always do at some point. How is he going to navigate that and manage it and keep the locker room together? Those things all matter. But that's going to be something he has to kind of learn on the job. And because of that, I don't know that it should just be like, well, we knocked this out of the park. Like, this isn't John Harbaugh. If John Harbaugh had been the guy they hired, I think then, yeah, you're partying in the streets, yelling Super Bowl, Super Browns, whatever. I don't know that this is that level, but I think it's like, okay, you can be excited about it from a standpoint of, let's see what this guy can do. Let's see what the vision is. Let's hope that he's a disciple of the McVay tree that pans out to bring this new style and this innovative perspective to the offense, and we'll be on our way. I think there's reasons to be happy about it. But I think there should be sort of this wait and see approach taken with Nate Sscheelhaase as well, assuming he's going to be the guy, which is at this point the way that I feel it's going to end up going. If you like what you heard, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make Locked On Browns your first listen every day, wherever you get your podcasts, and at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Also, if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Just get Locked On Browns ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Just go to lockedonbrowns.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more. You can also keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thanks for being every day at the Locked On Podcast Network. Next time you hear from me, the Browns may just have their new head coach. Talk to you then, Cleveland.